So why am I recording this right now? Um, it's I just I guess mostly to try to share it with myself what I've been diving into this maybe this last month. Um, and I'm gonna start with the framework that from Awakening from the Meaning Crisis by John Vervaeke. And at the end of the series, he talks specifically about the works of Tom Cheetham, maybe it's pronounced. And he strongly encouraged people to read all of Cheetham's work. And my interpretation of why he's saying this is after building this huge framework and throughout the series, it's I've thought of it as I have thought of maybe I should done this in writing instead, but maybe I will at some point. So maybe I can frame this video as a start of a writing or an essay or something like that. But to get back to the, I'm trying to, I guess, I'm trying to make a narrative of this, um, of my thoughts and my how I came to um, where I'm at now. I guess can say, and Verbeek is emphasizing the importance of like checking out the work of Tom Cheetham. So, and I think why my imagining why he does this is because uh, it's aligned with his project of revitalizing the Western way of thinking. That is our current worldview, and from our current worldview, it's is emerged in Western scientific reductionism. Um, And this is also convergent with Ian McGilchrist's work about the the left and the right hemisphere. That we tend to favorize logic, a logical way of thinking, that the left hemisphere is an expert of, instead of having the qualities, so to speak, from the right hemisphere. And the right hemisphere operates a little different. And this is not an either or. It's just to point out some of, or a little about how the left and the right hemisphere works. And as I was saying, the right hemisphere is more oriented towards depth and emotions and wholeness or gestalt. And the kind of issue in if we put that frame of the left and the right hemisphere into a cultural context, that means that in our society and a long tradition of Western thinking is mostly based on logic and to come a little closer to the issue that we're facing in the Western, especially the Western society today, it's that logic doesn't necessarily mean the same as truth. And to use Warwickian terms, it's logic and arguments is, as Warwicki calls it, a propositional way of knowing. And propositions is basically framing or theory that you can get from books and basically a suggestion about how a way to point to things. But maybe that's not the thing, is a way to interpret phenomena through a set of propositions. And of course, that's a useful thing to do. To gain knowledge or to have a frames of whatever we're looking at or through, or so, but it's not it's the old saying, like, if you point at the moon, it's not the moon. You can point at it, but it's not the actual thing. It's just pointers. And to make that distinction about to try to pull this together, the left, the right hemisphere is operates a different way because it's more connected, oriented towards mm, feelings and wholeness. So if we are too, like, I think from this framing, it's easy to see, to forget the importance of our connectedness to our feelings and to see the whole picture, so to speak. I think one example that McGilchrist uses often is that how we orient in the world is the example is that we need both capacities in order um, to have a relationship to ourselves and to others and to the world. And the example is that if we, as mammals, like we are partly mammals, despite of this sophisticated mind we're carrying around. But the example he uses is that our left hemisphere and the focus of details, that part can do is it can hone in on things in the environment. And from a evolutionary standpoint, that's very helpful in order if we are in we are in an environment and we have to find food, and we can kind of see that whatever kind of food it is, if there's a rabbit or there's a plant that we can eat in order to survive, we that's a useful thing, of course. That's kind of obvious. But if we just are focused on those details, there will be a problem if we are only focused on that, because we can be food ourselves if we're not paying attention. And this is kind of the point, how the attention that operates our left and the right hemisphere is very different, because an attention to details is a good thing if we're going to find food. But if our left or right hemisphere is not mm, active enough or trained enough, we we don't see the predator that might lurk in the forest or whatever, in the environment. And then we can become prey. Um, and so the central point to, as I understand it, is how we use our attention and how it's useful that we train both. And um yeah, so from attention, the phenomenon of attention, to go back to Rebeki's terminology, it's where mm, I can say that for me personally is incredibly dominated by the no, sorry, the right hemisphere. So this is to make sense of this and go back and forth between different frameworks and ways of thinking is very is not easy to do, because I tend to perceive things as yeah, not very specific, um, I guess not very detailed. So it's a good training, I guess, to try to put this in a hopefully a cohesive way, but I tend to, yeah, it takes time, obviously. So I was saying that if I go back to, if we have that attention, phenomena of attention, and put this back to the terminology to Rebecca, he talks about a propositional way of knowing and a participatory way of knowing. And participatory way of knowing is more embodied. Is not just concepts. It's not just framing or theory. Is more embodied way of understanding. And the embodiment aspect, you can also call it a phenomenological way of orienting. It's useful in the way that we can kind of sense into things. And the sensing into in itself is a different, it's not immediately available. We can't not, we usually we can't, like, if we encounter something we never encountered, is not immediately graspable for our mind if we come from a conceptual mm, um, point of view. So the distinction I'm trying to make is that it's useful to have a lot of different framings, conceptual framings. If we read books or theory, it's of course useful if we have an adequate amount, so to speak, of different ways of framing things or experience or situation or other people or our own whatever. So because then our perception is more nuanced if we have different kind of interpretations and framings of whatever. But if we encounter something we never encountered, it's not necessarily useful. We might have approximate associations, but I think also what occurs to me now is like how we learn new things. And before we have a terminology or a um, a framing, a word, or we it's useful to have an open mind before we label or frame or whatever we're trying to see or learn or perceive. So it's so this distinction until now is like the propositional, the theory, and also the embodied or the participatory way of knowing. And we tend to, or because of our kind of top-heavy way of conceptualizing things, and kind of not being, and by conceptualizing we can close off different aspects of and make ourselves right, so to speak. And that can of course be, we might have be right whatever how we're framing our mm, yeah, but we might also be terribly wrong, but we like to have right. Or another way to put it, that as going back to the left hemisphere, is if our left hemisphere may draws a conclusion based on logic, like ABC, D, it has have to be D. The left hemisphere is like, yeah, that's what I told you. Um, I have, so we get this burst of like, yeah, you can call it ego, that their ego, like, yeah, that's how it all makes sense logically. So of course it has to be right, correct. And that kind of closes our off on if we talk about different kinds of interpretations. And of course, this can go on forever. I can make myself, or my left hemisphere can make itself right. We're getting right, left, right, yeah. So, and if we continue to be governed by our left hemisphere, it's very easy to get stuck in a framing of something and kind of reinforce our left way of being right. And that makes a certain thing where we're wrong can also do this and make ourselves wrong. It's still a pattern that getting reinforced. So it's useful to have an open mind and consider different kinds of interpretations of whatever situation or person or our own experience or whatever we find ourselves in our thinking. And the Buddhist talks about this as having a new beginner's mind. And right now I want to throw in the idea of or yeah, the idea of stability. Before I go further into or go back to um, what Tom Cheatham's work is about, if I manage. It's having an open mind or a new beginner's mind is also useful to a degree. It makes our perception and mind open to being wrong, that our left hemisphere is not very fond of, because it wants desperately to have a logical explanation of something. Um, but to have to The problem with being open-minded, or the issue might be that it might not be very efficient, but yeah, so being being me and being dominated or conditioned or whatever, however you want to put it, it takes some time for me to 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 think, at least uh, think in a way that I find mm, I want to use the word nourishing for my own system, like on a nervous system level. That affords me a sense of wholeness in an embodied way. And that's why I really love to read and to sometimes write, and yeah. So where is I going with this? I'm going towards yeah, so for the last, I think, at least 4 years, I've kind of followed for hundreds of hours and participated in different kind of practices that I mentioned before, but basically absorbed but quite extensively this different kind of, or this framework offered by Rebecca and people that is inspired and from this, yeah. And how long have I been talking? I don't see any recording, is just on. Yeah, it will be helpful to have some time holder. Yeah, but I'm not gonna do that now. So going back to my point, my initial point, it's oh, the point I'm trying to make is probably several, but um, to go back to the from John Rebecca's emphasis on the work of Tom Chatham that I followed because it sounded interesting when he talked about it. And he's talking a lot about Rebecca also throughout his that we as Westerners and the way of thinking and the current culture needs a new mythology, so we can have a more sense of that that the world is a meaningful place, that we can cultivate a sense of meaning to prevent our pervasive nihilism and not realizing that we inhabit a meaningful place in being and thinking and feeling and imaginative beings that we are or have the potential to be. And the problem with I'm gonna try to connect two things. Having a logical, argumentative way of perceiving and thinking might be prevent us from connecting more to the felt sense and the wholeness and also the sacredness of being that our right hemisphere is capable of. And to throw in, to connect also this to Tom Chetham's work, that Rebecca is recommending us to dive into. It's useful to have an active imagination, to use Jung's term. So I kind of follow that that and this opens up a vast amount of possibilities. And the central thing of possibilities is having is orienting our perception towards as as some as Tom Chatham and others is talking about that we can orient ourselves to a way of um, experiencing the world from a poetic sensibility. Where the creativity of our lives can be opened up and cultivated. And I want to just, before I go towards a more radical perception of the possibilities of our poetic mind or creative imagine or creative power of our imagination is. Before I touch on that, I want to go back, or I want to also point out that we're kind of entrenched in it already, but it's surrounds us all the time, and especially it's formed. Our imagination is very formed by formed and informed by entertainment. And entertainment has these attractive qualities because, in my thinking, it's imaginative. And but it's already framed in a way or directed in a way. That's why we love movies, and that's why because it's engaging our imaginative capacities. And then this brings me towards the radical idea that Chatham and Jung and Henry Corbin and James Hillman and many other thinkers that's been thinking about this that I don't know about yet. I have enough reading at hand to make this clearer for myself, but to come to the radicalness of this is to say that the question becomes like, what is actually how or how much of my imagination is not formed by entertainment? How many original ideas is actually from my own imagination and not informed by already chewed up and directed um, ways of imagining? Yeah, so and to use Chetham's that kind of inspired me to talk about this now, to try to integrate more of this understanding about the imagination. He said that like, yeah, that's why so many of thinkers throughout the history is inventing new words to get us out of our preconsider our pro, our previous conceptualizations about our current framing. That's why they use words that they think is useful to get us out of our preconceived ideas and ways of thinking. And I also it brings me back to the process of writing that I've like played around with for a while. Because all these words and terminology and imagining and like listening I've been doing is I think a way to put it that I'm kind of realizing right now, it has to, it's kind of starting to have a life of its own. It's very weird to realize that. Huh. It's kind of very, yeah, probably. I have no idea what that means at the moment, but I have a strong suspicion that uh, when this has a life of its own, it's means something. I have a felt or an intuition that when this has a life of its own, whatever this is, it means something. Huh. I have no idea what it means, but my intuition tells me that it means something. Life of its own. Yeah, I was talking, where was I? I was talking about, I was coming, what occurred to me was the process of writing. It's, yeah, I was saying that I played around with this process of writing, and it's very like interesting and kind of, it's not only interesting, it's kind of surprising because mm, it 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 I have actually no idea how to do it, or I know how to write, obviously, but I can form letters and sentences, but it's I don't know what will um, show up in in my in my process or my writing. It's not like so. Uh, uh, yeah, there's an obvious connection right now in the process of writing and active imagination. Um, and open-mindedness and to use Varrock a serious play and the notion he uses from a cognitive science perspective that in order to that the idea of enactment that maybe a way to put it that is that process of writing for me is an enactment process of that's coupled with the imaginal. This is starting to get very complex. Mm. Um, yeah, there's okay. I have a frame that might be useful right now, and it's the frame of or the notion of gathering. I think that's what's going on in my experience of trying to put words to these things. There's a sense of gathering of uh, different kind of frames and notions, and it's kind of I notice I'm humming a lot, and the humming or the humming is usually something that happens when there's some sort of unconscious things happening that I have no idea what it means, but there's maybe a sense of integration, or maybe, yeah. Um, I notice I want to try to wrap things up, and how to do that. There's so many things so many directions to go from this place into cultural perspectives, and so I guess I can use Rebeccan terminology again and say that I think might be that point, like the perspectival, as he calls it, way of knowing opens up from where I'm sitting right now. Um, and it's a vast amount of directions, um, cultural, individual, like blah blah blah, whatever direction. And so I touched on propositional ways of knowing, and participatory way of knowing, and now I'm kind of finding myself in the middle of a perspectival way of knowing that's been kind of in the that that has I've been doing throughout this talk, or trained, and so I think also to conclude the four kinds of knowing that I'm borrowing from Rebecca is the last way of knowing from the four, and that's the procedural ways of knowing how to do what you're gonna do, or how to take action, how to do what you're gonna do, whatever that is a way of knowing that how to proceed, or how to make a share. You have to use different tools and stuff like that. How to perform an action in an appropriate way. So that's the fourth kind of knowing. So for me right now, the procedural way of knowing is how to make sounds and words. Uh, so that's the action, the procedural way of knowing how to form words. If I managed to do that at all. Or obviously I did, but I'm not sure if this is making a whole lot of sense. I'm hoping that it will. It made sense for this individual, for this person that's speaking right now. Uh, And the perspectives that was used, that I tried to use, was the perspectival capacity. I managed to touch on. And the phenomenological, or the participatory, was present, at least at some point, that more embodied sense, participatory sense showed up. And all the frameworks, or the propositional also showed up, or was present. So I'm gonna push the stop button and do some other things. I If you've been listening, thank you for listening. And I think I'm gonna do this more, actually, because I think I find this a good way of integrating, and it's not the same as writing at all. It's different, and yeah, I think it's a very good way to integrate stuff, and also at the same time share it with people who might be interested in this these things. So I will catch you next time, and I wish you a good day or a night, or whatever your time zone might be.